Languages can die, but unlike living creatures, some of them can also come back to life. Today, I'll share with you 5 stories of those languages that have risen from the dead. Join me. But first of all, welcome to Language Easy. This is actually the second part of our series about revived languages. If you haven't seen the first part yet, do check it out. Just like in the first part, I won't be taking you too deep into linguistics. Instead, I'll briefly remind you of these 2 very important terms: language revitalization and language revival. Here's a quick look at how some linguists distinguish between them. In the previous part, we explored Hebrew, Cornish, Irish, Maori, and Hawaiian, mostly stories of successful revitalization. But today, the stories of the languages we'll hear about are about ones that are in the middle of this process, or else those ones that are showing strong signs of being revitalized. Let's go now to meet the first language. And to explore the first language in our list, we need to travel to the area between Great Britain and Ireland, the Isle of Man. The Manx language belongs to the Celtic family, specifically the Gaelic or Gaelic branch. It is closely related to Irish and Scottish Gaelic, and speakers of these languages can still understand each other to a certain extent. Manx is believed to have developed from the primitive Irish, the ancestor of all Gaelic languages. It was brought to the Isle of Man in the 4th and 5th centuries AD by monks and missionaries spreading Christianity. Alongside the religion, they brought their language, replacing the pre-existing Brythonic, which left very little trace on the island. Looking at the history that followed, primitive Irish shifted into Old Irish during the 5th century. From the 9th century, the Isle of Man faced Viking raids, and the Norse eventually settled and controlled the island. However, the Norse had little influence on the language, leaving only a few words of Norse origin. By the 10th century, Middle Irish was spoken on the island, which over time and through various political changes evolved into the Manx language we know today. The Manx language itself faced many challenges, including influences from other languages such as English, Irish, and Scottish. By the late of the 13th century, the island came under English control, and from then on, all the official documents were written in English or Latin, leaving Manx largely unwritten. The earliest surviving Manx writings date from 1610, and the first published book appeared in 1707, a translation of the Principles and Duties of Christianity by Bishop Thomas Wilson. This religious text, often called the Manx Catechism, was the first printed publication in Manx Gaelic and helped establish a written standard for the language. By the 17th century, English had almost completely taken over the island. Governor Isaac Barrow even required English to be used in schools and churches. Surprisingly, one of the biggest blows to Manx came from tourism. In 1833, a regular ferry service between England and the Isle of Man brought waves of tourists to the island, creating a demand for English-speaking workers in hotels and shops. As a local proverb puts it, when tourists came in, the Manx language went out. So, by the late 18th century, almost every school taught in English. The decline continued into the 19th century as English gradually became the dominant language on the Isle of Man. Like other Celtic and Gaelic languages, Manx experienced a rapid decline in both written and spoken use during the 19th century, driven by the rise of English and the beginning of massive tourism. Brian Stowell notes, in the 1860s there were thousands of Manx people who couldn't speak English, but barely a century later, speaking Manx was considered so backward that stories circulated of people having stones thrown at them for using it. Manx quickly became associated with poverty and ignorance, even among its own speakers. Many parents chose to speak only English to their children, reserving Manx as a secret family language. A visitor to the Isle of Man noted in a letter dated 1883 that there can be no doubt that the Manx people are thoroughly ashamed of their language. They say, and of course with truth, that it is of no use to them, either for advancement in life or for the acquisition of the most ordinary information. He mentions that the language is constantly ridiculed by their English visitors, that the Manx speak nothing but English when there is a chance of strangers overhearing them, and that those who habitually use Manx were spoken of with contempt by their other Manx people of their own class who used English only. Moreover, the one monoglot Manx speaker he knew of was viewed as something of a novelty, and people would make a point of visiting her. Manx was already on the brink of extinction. In 1974, the last native speaker of Manx passed away, and with him the language was officially declared dead. But all was not lost. Even as the island had largely shifted to English, a handful of passionate individuals had begun to slowly breathe life into their native tongue. One of the earliest revitalists dedicated himself to collecting traditional Manx songs and tunes. Alongside him there was another activist who worked tirelessly to preserve folk songs and cultural stories. Their efforts were not just about words, they were about saving the island's identity. John J. Keane became one of the most prolific Manx scholars in the 20th century. He published Manx lessons in newspapers, compiled a grammar and a dictionary, and even created a book of conversational phrases. His research extended beyond the language itself into the island's history, folklore, and place names, weaving together the story of Manx culture. Despite these efforts, the UNESCO's Atlas of Endangered Languages still classifies Manx as definitely endangered, highlighting that it still needs active support to survive for future generations. Revival was never easy. In the early years, most locals were indifferent or even hostile to the idea. Those learning Manx often claimed that they were doing it just to be able to read Bible, avoiding the label of language reviver. True enthusiasts spent hours talking with the last native speakers, recording their voices, and speaking Manx whenever they could. Today, the language lives on. On the 5th of July every year, the laws passed over the year are read in both English and Manx, giving the language some visibility. There are some schools, community classes, and cultural initiatives that ensure that children grow up learning Manx. While the Isle of Man may never become fully Manx speaking again, the efforts of people show that a dead language can rise again. From the small Isle of Man we now travel far across the world to the Andes of South America. Here another ancient language story awaits for us, Quechua. Technically, Quechua is a language family with many related varieties spoken across the Andes. In everyday terms, people often refer to it simply as a single language, and in southern Quechua it goes by this name, which means people's language. Quechua, one of the oldest languages in the Americas, has been spoken for centuries by the indigenous peoples of the Andes. It was the administrative language of the Inca Empire, which unified a vast and diverse population. Today it remains a vital part of Peru's cultural heritage. This language family originated in central Peru and gradually spread across the Andes. By the time the Inca rose to power, Quechua had already reached many regions spoken by various indigenous communities. Regional dialects developed, shaped by local languages which the Inca then promoted as the empire's official language. After the Spanish conquest in the 16th century, Quechua continued to serve as the common language for the indigenous peoples. The Spanish authorities recognized the language, and many Spaniards learned it in order to communicate with the local communities. Catholic missionaries also adopted Quechua for evangelization. One of the first written records was produced by Domingo de Santo Tomás, who arrived in Peru in 1538 and published a grammar of Quechua in 1560, creating the first structured guide to the language. Despite its widespread use, colonial policies eventually restricted Quechua. After this rebellion in the late 18th century, authorities banned public use of the language. Even loyal pro-Catholic texts were censored. After the independence of Latin American nations in the 19th century, there was a brief revival, but the prestige of Quechua had declined sharply. Its use became largely confined to indigenous communities in rural and isolated areas. Despite centuries of challenges, Quechua survives with roughly 7 million speakers across South America, making it the most widely spoken indigenous language family in the Americas. Today, UNESCO classifies Quechua as definitely endangered, again showing us that it needs a lot of extra support. And some modern initiatives help keep Quechua alive. Various community organizations promote language learning and cultural exchange. So, from the heights of the Andes to the community classrooms, Quechua endures. A testament to the resilience of language and culture. It is more than just about words. It's about history, heritage, and culture. We are now going back to the branch of the Gaelic languages and have a look at the Scottish Gaelic language, which can also be called as Scots Gaelic or just Gaelic. Scottish Gaelic is part of the Gaelic branch of Celtic languages alongside Irish and Manx. It developed from Old Irish and became a distinct spoken language around the 13th century. Even though Scottish Gaelic started to sound different from Irish, the written form of the language was very similar in both countries. People in Scotland and Ireland could read the same texts well into the 17th century, including poems, religious writings, and historical chronicles. By the mid-14th century, Scots, then called English, became the language of the government and law. Early Scottish patriotic literature such as John Barber's The Bruce and Blind Harry's The Wallace was written in Scots, not Gaelic. Over time, Scottish Gaelic gradually declined due to government policies, social change, and the growing dominance of English. In the 18th century, evangelical preachers encouraged Gaels to read religious texts in their own language. The New Testament translation appeared in 1767, followed by a full Gaelic Bible in 1801. However, many parents prioritized English for practical reasons. In 1829, the Gaelic School Society recorded that families wanted their children to learn English in order to earn a living rather than focus on Gaelic. The language was largely ignored in education. During the 19th and 20th centuries, local education authorities in the Scottish Highlands often held anti-Gaelic attitudes, which obviously limited the access of Gaelic education programs. Today, around 60,000 people speak Scottish Gaelic, mainly in the Highlands and Scottish Islands. UNESCO classifies it as definitely endangered, meaning it still requires active support. Revival efforts include Gaelic medium schools for children, television and radio programming, cultural festival and community initiatives promoting daily use. Scottish Gaelic continues to shape Scotland's identity through music, poetry, and place names. It reminds us that languages are much more than just words. It's identity, culture, heritage. So let's see what the future holds for this amazing, fascinating language. And from the Highlands of Scotland, we now travel to South Asia to explore Sanskrit, one of the oldest and most influential languages on our planet. Unlike Manx or Scottish Gaelic, Sanskrit actually never died, never completely disappeared, but its journey from a spoken language to a classical literary one is really worth looking at. Sanskrit is an Indo-Aryan language, part of the Indo-European family, and has been spoken in India for over 3,000 years. It was the language of Vedic hymns, the Upanishads, and a vast body of literature including epic poems as well as texts of science, mathematics, philosophy, and law. Sanskrit was not just the language of the elite. During its peak, it was used for religious rituals, administration, education, and cultural exchange across South Asia. Its systematic grammar was codified by the ancient scholar around the 4th century BCE in his famous work, which remains a cornerstone of linguistic study even today. Over centuries, Sanskrit gradually lost its role as a spoken language in everyday life. As regional languages developed, Sanskrit became mainly a literary and religious language. By the medieval period, it was mostly used by priests, scholars, and poets, while ordinary people communicated in their local languages. However, Sanskrit never truly died. According to this Sanskrit scholar, Sanskrit was never a dead language and is still alive, though its prevalence is far less than in ancient and medieval times. It continues to be an integral part of Hindu festivals, rituals, and religious or cultural publications. Similarly, scholar Brian Hatcher points out that Sanskrit never truly died. Even between the 13th and 18th century, it remained vibrant in the Hindu kingdoms, and its traditions and reverence continues to this day. During the 19th and 20th centuries, scholars and cultural organizations began systematic preservation and teaching of Sanskrit, establishing schools and universities and promoting the study of its literature, philosophy, and science. In modern times, Sanskrit-speaking communities, online courses, podcasts, and global academic programs are helping keep the language alive, not just as a written heritage, but as a living tradition. Sanskrit continues to play a central role in religious and cultural life. It is the sacred language of Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain traditions. Many Hindu rites of passage, from weddings and baby naming ceremonies to cremations, invoke Sanskrit hymns. Sanskrit shows that even a language not widely spoken in daily life can remain alive through music, traditions, and culture, even influencing millions of people in different countries and continents. And now, from the sacred chants of Sanskrit, let's cross the Atlantic to explore Wampanoag, the language of the indigenous peoples of what now we know as Massachusetts in the United States. The Wampanoag people call themselves People of the First Light. They originally spoke a dialect of the Massachusetts language, which belongs to this language family. European contact began in the 16th century. In 1524, one explorer met indigenous peoples along the coast of what is now Rhode Island. By 1614, Captain Thomas Hunt captured several Wampanoag people and sold them in Spain as slaves. These early encounters, combined with colonial expansion, disease, and cultural disruption, contributed to a rapid decline in the number of speakers, which accelerated further after the American Revolution. By the late 19th century, Wampanoag was considered extinct as a spoken language, though written records and word lists survived. In the late 20th century, a remarkable revival movement began. Led by one Wampanoag linguist and the Wampanoag community, the language was reconstructed using historical documents, which preserved vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation. Today, Wampanoag is spoken by new generations, taught in schools, and celebrated in community events. Immersion programs, workshops, and language classes allow younger Wampanoag people to speak fluently and maintain cultural traditions tied to their language. The Wampanoag revival demonstrates that even languages considered extinct can return to life through dedication, documentation, and community effort. I guess Wampanoag is a real story of hope and resilience, reminding us again and again that languages are not just tools for communication. They are the heart of people's culture, heritage, and history. Languages carry real stories of entire communities. Today, from Manx to Wampanoag, we've seen that even those languages that seemed to be dead can be brought back to life with care and a lot of dedication. If you love languages and their hidden stories, or want to learn languages without stressing out, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Also join my language diary club if you'd like to connect your language study process with art. Check all the links in the video description. Thank you for joining me today and see you next time.